Joining me now from Sanlam Investment Management is Mzwandile Ngcobo. Is that correct?
Yeah.
This has been the biggest challenge I've had in 2 days, is all the pronunciations.
No, pretty spot on.
And you are referred to, or you refer to yourself as?
Z.
Z.
Happy to go by Z.
I've got no idea where the Z comes from out of his name, but we're going to go with Z. Z, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So explain to our viewers your role within Sanlam Investment Management.
So I sit within Sanlam Alternative Investments as an alternative investment specialist, ultimately cross-covering all our capabilities from an investor relation, capital formation perspective, ultimately client-facing in respect to how we interact with the market around our alternatives capability, and obviously work really closely with the broader and Sanlam Investments capabilities.
So what is alternatives in your definition? Some people will see it as things like hedge funds, others will see it as private markets, some have both. What is your definition?
So our definition of alternative investments is ultimately non-traditional in the private markets, going into hedge funds, so alternative forms of alpha which usually manifest themselves in the form of private markets.
Okay, and private markets has been a big theme under the banner of impact at the IRFA conference. What about, is private markets or all private markets impact? Or is impact private markets? Are the two the same or different?
I think they can exist mutually exclusive. It's just in the world of private markets, you have the ability to affect the real economy in ways that you might not have in the public market. So they can be an impact thesis in the private markets, but doesn't always necessarily exist unless you build it into your thesis. But I do think it's highly impactful when lending SMEs money, building infrastructure. But it's not to say that you ordinarily would have private markets and impact go hand in hand. You have to build the impact thesis into it.
So how would a customer decipher whether indeed something that you're offering is impact or not? What would you say to them they should look for?
I think if you can't measure something, you can't change it. So if something is in the impact sphere, you need to be able to measure it, as a starting point, and have an impact thesis. So portfolio construction must be built around impactful goals and being able to measure them. And it can't just say impact on the tin. I think the measurability of impact is quite important as opposed to just saying something's impact.
So a lot of people have been burnt because it says impact on the tin, and there's a term that's used called greenwashing, essentially from a climate perspective, and that has created some skepticism, less so in South Africa, but very much globally, and particularly in Europe, who are ahead of the game in that regard. So what are some of those measures? So you would have things like carbon emission reduction. What other measures would you guys be looking at specifically on the social impact side of things as well?
Yeah. Depending on the different strategies, it would vary, but we do like to focus on jobs. Because I think we at a critical point in South Africa and on the continent where we do need to create more jobs. So look to make investments that are enabling the economy by creating jobs. So, and that you can measure the quality of the jobs, the amount of jobs, the sustainability of the jobs is one of our key tenets in terms of our impact thesis. And then again, affordability in respect to affordable housing, affordable student housing, affordable healthcare, providing social infrastructure to give the backdrop to create affordability for this missing middle that is in South Africa, where they employ but just ultimately don't have the firepower or ability to have best-in-class affordability in the normal spheres of life, be it healthcare, housing, and student.
So a little tongue-in-cheek and a bit of a joke. So yesterday you mentioned jobs and how important jobs is in our environment. I interviewed an ex-minister of employment from the UK. His name is Guy Opperman. And I thought to myself, we don't have a minister of employment. And I realized why. Yeah. We've got a minister of unemployment. so hopefully you can put him out of a job at some point in time. So the job that you do must be quite gratifying to see actual physical development taking place, being able to see that impact. And I'm asking that question because I feel that trustees themselves, when they see that, will realize the important role that they've got to play as asset owners in helping develop South Africa and creating opportunities for returns in future generation.
100%. So I think, seeing very often is believing, and seeing a road or site visits are critical in this sphere where people can ultimately see their community being impacted by pension pools and their direct capital that they're custodians of, actually making an impact in the lives of not just the members, but the members' families, the members' community, and actually physically seeing that through infrastructure, through jobs being created, through a vibrant ecosystem that wasn't there, or having access to retail shopping is what kind of drives me.
And the pension funds, when was it? Many years ago, had Regulation 28 adjusted to allow for 45% in infrastructure. I think it's 15 or 20 or even 25% private equity. Yet there hasn't been really that much of a take-up. So how easy is it to raise capital institutionally from pension funds? And I have a follow-up question, but let me first.
Cool. I think still quite a challenge, because I think there's an education gap, and I think ourselves as service providers and providers of these alternative investment vehicles do have to play a role in educating people in respect to using these alternatives in portfolio construction and how they intend to work. I think there's a bit of an education gap that we still need to play a big role in terms of. So capital raising environment is quite challenging. It is an asset class that operates better at scale in terms of the investment size, and we do have quite a fragmented financial sort of ecosystem in the retirement system space here in South Africa. So I think a bit of education, maybe a little bit of consolidation, and partnerships alongside pension funds with managers to co-invest in things that will actually move the needle for the South African economy.
I think we're seeing a shift. I mean, there's a lot of talk this year around impact private markets and so on. So I think, if anything, that understanding, or at least the awareness, is developing massively. But one of the concerns that any trustee would have is liquidity. Their ability, especially now given two-pot and so on, to liquidate assets to pay benefits. Now, you guys, I'm assuming, given the time you've been around, have some very mature funds that would be open-ended, as well as then you would also raise capital for some close-ended funds through that process. So maybe just explain for the viewers the difference between the two, and am I right in my assumption?
Yeah, 100%. So maybe just a quick explanation. So a close-ended fund typically has two closes, where there's an initial capital raise, the investment team will start deploying that capital, and then another capital raise, and finally close it, and then fully deploy that capital over a traditional 5-year period, and then look to exit investments to return all that capital back to investors within another 5-year period. And the cycle starts again. And we're in an open-ended fund. These are more permanent capital vehicles where you commit capital to a manager, and they recycle that capital in investments in that strategy for the prolonged period of time, where liquidity events can happen at the request of the investor at very specific gates and times and periods where it would be suited to possibly exit that. But maybe quickly on the liquidity, an important one is to try to reframe liquidity in the context of portfolio construction. It becomes quite important to ultimately, I know it's box season, so you have to earn the right to go wide in alternative investments by building portfolios, using things like private credit, real estate, to build a block that is cash generative, which creates liquidity in that portfolio to then go wide and do some more private equity, private venture capital higher up on the stack. So like, you can think of liquidity slightly differently when you start using private credit as an example, which is a self-liquidating asset, but yet is in the private markets. Its liquidity will come in the form of paying you coupons and capital back over the time.
Okay, good. So you guys have been active here at the conference. What have you been up to? Do you have an exhibition stand? Have you been speaking?
Yes, yeah. So we actually I'm very privileged to host the welcome cocktail event, which I did a welcome address, ultimately speaking around a lot of these topics that we are discussing now. We have a stand, Sanlam Investments has a stand showcasing our multiple capabilities, breadth and depth of capabilities and skills, interacting with pension funds, trustees, principal officers, industry colleagues. It's always a really good time to just get a sense of where we're at, what's on the members' minds, and I guess a rising tide lifts all boats. So collaboration amongst our peers and competitors is critical, given the scale and size of our infrastructure gap. So working together and just having a good ear of what's happening on the ground.
Okay, well that sounds great, and I wish you all the very best in driving the impact theme in South Africa. I think it's critical that South Africa starts seeing all investing in a three-dimensional way. It's not just about risk and return, but it's about ultimately impact, or what our money gets used for through the investments that we make. So well done and congratulations on that. I wish you the very best, and thank you for coming to join us here in the studio.
Thanks very much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you for everybody at the conference, and this was a great chat.
And if our viewers would like to get hold of you, how can they do that?
I'm happy to get hold of me on my email address, which is Mzwandile N@sanlaminvestments.com.
There you go. Thanks very much, Mzwandile.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Cheers.